What a weekend in the SEC from on-field and, of course, off-field storylines. And he joins us every single Monday, one of the best in the business to talk all things SEC football, our good friend, Chris Doering of SEC Network. Chris, what's going on, my man? Things heating up. The coaching carousel is beginning. I know you said off air that not your favorite time of year because you've been in the trenches, you've been in the battles, you've been in those locker rooms. You know how much work goes into it, but I guess 'tis the season, my friend. What's going on? How's it
It
going?
is. Hey, man, good to be back with you. It is interesting because I've talked an awful lot about my time as a player in the NFL. 10 years in the NFL, got cut 10 different times, got cut any number of ways you could have been cut, and I just always I have some sort of empathy for those that kind of go through that. And I know that's part of the business, and I know that Jimbo Fisher's walking away with a significant amount of money not to coach, but I just go back to that press conference back in December of 2017. It seemed like such a great fit, and both sides. The resume for Jimbo Fisher seemed like exactly what A&M needed. A&M with the financial support and the facilities, it seemed like everything that Jimbo Fisher needed. And here we are, in 2013 with nothing really to show for any of that money, not even a single SEC West championship. So I understand the bottom line business. He had 4 or more losses in 5 of his 6 seasons. Texas A&M was not paying him that exorbitant amount of money to be average, basically to be the same guy that Kevin Sumlin was. But I do have some empathy for him, and what that means to have not gotten the job done, and his family's implications. More so, maybe just the assistants too. The assistants are the ones that aren't making that same amount of money, aren't getting a big parting gift, and have to now find new jobs, new homes for their kids, new schools for them to go to. It's tough business side of it, man.
And Chris, I heard on your clip you mentioned on SEC Now the hiring when it happened in 2017. It felt like the perfect fit, right? You're talking about a guy who'd won a national championship. He had the pedigree, right? Of course, the expectations sky high. Texas A&M literally presents him with a trophy that had a blank date on it for when, not if, but when they would win the national championship. So, Chris, we'll jump right into it. Just when you heard the news, your immediate reactions to it, were you surprised? I mean, we knew this was a possibility, but coming at this point in the season, what was your immediate reaction to the news?
Yeah, let me take you back to Saturday night because I was asked by some of our producers and coordinating producers my availability on Sunday for a show on some breaking news. I assumed it was going to be a coaching firing. Did not think it was Texas A&M. They were at that point up by about 40 on Mississippi State. So I was actually thinking it was probably going to be another team that had not looked very good earlier in the day on Saturday. And then to find out this morning when I woke up that it was actually Jimbo Fisher that was being relieved of his duties. Not surprised. I mean, we've talked about this. I feel like the last couple of years about the buyout, about the money that the A&M boosters have, about the fact that they haven't really had anything that really resembled the success that they were expecting. But I think the timing of it was a little interesting, particularly, coming off a big win last night or Saturday night against Mississippi State.
Now, Ross Bjork speaking to the media, Chris, Texas A&M athletic director. Obviously, you guys carried that on SEC Network. He had this to say. This quote stood out to me. Quote, "Our program is stuck in neutral. We should be relevant on the national scene. Something is not clicking, and therefore something had to give." Again, Chris, you followed this. You guys covered it. Your thoughts on what the Texas A&M Aggies athletic director had to say and his message, you think, what you took away from his words?
You know what I took away, actually, before we talk specifically about A&M, some of our stats and information group packets in preparation for the show tonight showed the last couple years winning percentage. The lowest teams in the conference included, besides Vanderbilt, my alma mater, Florida, Texas A&M, Auburn, Arkansas. You're talking about some well-funded programs there with a lot of history of success. And to think about those schools being the worst in terms of winning percentage, I think it shows how competitive this conference is as a whole. I think it shows how difficult it is to win. All of those schools have had coaching changes in the last 5 years, and expect some more probably in the near future as well. I made the comment on the show on Sunday night about the likelihood when you hire a coach as an athletic director is far more that you're going to be firing him or he's going to be fired than it is they're going to win a national championship. And it's a lot of pressure that goes along with being an athletic director. I don't know why you would want to have that job, in all honesty. Now, I mean, you're beholden to your football coach, who you're probably paying, 7 or 8 times what you're actually getting paid yourself. Nobody's ever happy in the fan base, and it's more times than not, trying to just keep everybody pushing in the same direction. But this, Chris, we've all had those instances where the fan base is completely fractured, and there's really no positive. It gets to a point where it's just becomes so toxic that you have to kind of make that change. And they definitely have been stuck in neutral. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. Ross Bjork made the comment that he can't put his finger on it, but something's wrong. And at the end of the day, great business people understand if you know something's not working, it's time to pull the plug now and not let it linger.
Yeah, Chris, on that note, it's a great segue. I mean, you just mentioned we don't know, but if you had to guess, just based off of your time around the A&M program, covering the A&M program, talking about it, if you will, I mean, what do you think it was? Was it offensive struggles? Was it cultural issues? I feel like that's something that kind of reared its ugly head over the last couple years. What do you think Jimbo Fisher's like the reason for his undoing? Because I think that was the most damning thing, right? You look on paper, and I mean, if I gave you a blind test and said, okay, here's all the recruiting classes, who is this team? You might guess it's Alabama or it's Georgia or it's a top 5 national program competing for the playoffs. Meanwhile, they're not even a top 25 team, and nobody did less with more than Jimbo Fisher did.
Yeah, you know what? I'll go back and talk about Alabama and Georgia. My co-host on SEC this morning, Peter Burns, often says, those schools don't recruit, they select. And I think it's important when you're evaluating players that you want to be a part of your team. Obviously, the fit in terms of what you're going to be running schematically on offense or defense, their ability to adjust to what they're going to be taught at the next level. But they have to be good people, man. They have to fit your culture. And I think if you go back the last few years, those Texas A&M recruiting classes that were highly ranked, what about the fallout from guys that didn't make it, or the guys, missing curfew the night before games, or smoking weed in the locker room? Like, there's something to be said for having not only great players, but great people as well. And I think that's something that Georgia and Alabama have really perfected. They do a nice job of evaluating all of those things. I think for a while there, it was just, hey, let's. You can say what you want. They bought all the players. Everybody's buying their players. So let's roll out as much money as we can, and let's get the top recruiting class, because it feels like that's what we need to do. When in reality, it's like, yeah, we need to get some great players, but let's get the great people as well. Look at Georgia. Ladd McConkey is one of the best receivers in the country as well. Doesn't necessarily look like your prototypical wide receiver, but he's a guy from right down the road near Athens. Loves the Georgia program. I can speak from my firsthand experience. Like, it means something more when you're invested in that program, and the history of that program is something that you're aware of and that you want to, play your best for. And so I think that, I know that's those are less frequent than the ones that just want to show up, play 3 years, and go to the next level. But I think you have to find the right people. And I don't know that they had the right fit there with a lot of those highly recruited players on the last few years recruiting classes.
Chris, last thing, and I promise we'll move on to the rest of the SEC slate, but on the Texas A&M thing, you pay $76 million, right, to get Jimbo Fisher out of there. The expectations in College Station are very clear cut. Now the question comes to, where do they go from here? I mean, because you don't pay $76 million to get rid of Jimbo unless you have your crosshairs set on a big time name. So not asking for a short list, but I mean, I'm sure you would expect them to make a really, really big time splash hire.
Yeah, it has to be, right? I mean, it has to be somebody that's going to be able to get the excitement of the fan base back up. I think there's already an excitement about, the idea of a change coming, but it has to be somebody that fits the criteria of an exciting hire, a great recruiter, a good face for the program in general, somebody that knows the culture of that unique area, the unique school. I mean, you know as well as I do, it's definitely been described as having a little different feel to it. So I think those are all things I mentioned on the show that I would expect somebody to have SEC experience as well. I don't think you can come into this conference and not have any idea what you're dealing with, like we saw maybe Brian Harsin a couple of years ago. But here's the other thing, Chris, is like, who are you going to go get that's not involved in a potential – it's going to be a great splash hire that's not involved in, a run right now to playing in the postseason. People talk about Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning's going to be tied up, presumably. I mean, they go win the Pac-12, and he's playing in the college football playoffs. You're talking about you're going to leave there and go to a new school. Meanwhile, the recruiting signing days is going to be taking place in December. Like, there's a reason they made the move now is to get out there and be the first to get the people that they want to talk to. But I still think it's going to be challenging, given a lot of the people that you probably want to talk to are ones that are involved in some real races within their conference and potentially nationally.
Certainly, Chris, the number of zeros on the check they present will not be the problem. So we shall see.
Did you listen, Chris? Did you hear Ross Bjork's comments as it related to what he learned from his experiences going through all of this?
I did not hear the entire presser, so no.
So he mentioned that they were going to take a look at some different models for compensation and contracts. Like, I don't even know what that means. It's been nothing but an arms race. I played at Florida for Steve Spurrier when he became the first coach to make $1 million a year. We're talking about guys that don't have near the credentials that Coach Spurrier have, that making $9 million a year. I don't know how you go back from this, but you're not going to be able to go get somebody that's willing to take on that job, leave where they are right now, and not have an extraordinary buyout that's going to guarantee the money. I don't know how we go back from where we are right now with what's transpired with this arms race throughout college football.
Yeah, Chris, it feels like in college football, the money really doesn't exist. It's just it's these made up fairy tale numbers. And I mean, it is real, but you know what I mean? Like, it's monopoly money. These schools have an endless amount, and they're going to use it to their advantage. The rest of the SEC slate, Chris, some really good games. We'll go to Athens, Georgia first. My goodness. I mean, the Dogs just pound Ole Miss. This game was fun early, right? Jackson Dart, Lane Kiffin, the offense going back and forth. What did Georgia show you on Saturday night in that big win, 52-17 over the Rebels?
Yeah, my big takeaway was that all those Georgia fans that were freaking out back in September about Mike Bobo and what they were doing offensively need to apologize, because this dude has done a great job with this offense, the development of Carson Beck. I mean, he looks like he's in full control at all times out there, distributing the football. When you have Brock Bowers back, now Ladd McConkey in the lineup fully healthy, I mean, you're talking about your third and fourth options in the passing game being Dominic Lovett and Robert Thomas. Like, these guys are ones at every other school probably in the SEC, and he does a great job with the creativity of the offense and the play calling. The run game, the offensive line was able to just completely cave in the front seven for Ole Miss. Pretty impressive, 611 total yards of offense, 311 through the air, 300 on the ground, and just distributing the ball to so many different pieces of that offense. So I'm really impressed with that. Clearly, when you can hold Ole Miss's offense to 2 touchdowns the way that they did, that's a pretty dominant defensive performance. And I guess we'll talk about Alabama in a minute, but it's just the more things change, the more they stay the same. And as much as we thought this year could be different, I had LSU as my Western Division champion. See those two teams doing what they've done and getting better and better as the season's worn on, and just to expect a tremendous matchup in December just shows how well coached those teams are and how much better they are than everybody else in this league.
Chris, very well said. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We are getting Alabama, Georgia, of course, in the SEC title in Atlanta, and Bama disposing of Kentucky 49-21. Jalen Milroe goes off. And meanwhile, Kentucky, they've lost 4 of 5, and now they got to go to Williams-Brice Stadium. We'll talk about that in just a second. But what you saw from Alabama, I mean, again, that was a dominant performance, probably even more dominant than the final score indicated in that game.
Yeah, it was. And I was concerned for them going into this game, a noon game on the road after the LSU win. I mean, there's a lot of things that you're thinking, well, here comes a sloppy performance by the Tide. It was anything but that. I mean, just hitting the ground, running offensively, watching Jalen Milroe throw the football. The time that the offensive line gave him, he wasn't even touched all day long in the pocket. Had time to scramble and let receivers uncover the explosive plays in the passing game, complemented by his running ability. It's feeling more and more like this offense has really figured things out. Jalen Milroe is very comfortable in that style, and Tommy Rees, credit him as well for the way they're evolving along with Jalen Milroe and understanding just how unique a talent is that they have there. So it was fun to watch. I thought Kentucky would be more competitive, but again, I think that speaks to just how good Alabama is and how much they've evolved since that loss to Texas and the near miss against South Florida in Week 3.
Yeah, Chris, if it wasn't for a muff punt, I'm not even sure Kentucky is in that football game. Switching gears, Chris, let's say Alabama, hypothetically, they go on a run, beat Georgia in the SEC title, make the playoff, they win it all. Is there any chance that Nick Saban calls it a career after that?
I have a hard time. We had some sound on Saturday night on our show of him talking about how much fun he's had with this team and how
It's been
teams
a
in the
great
past have.
coaching job. Been a great coaching job.
I think I've told you this a couple times throughout the season that I think Nick Saban has done the best job of coaching his team this year than any of the previous years at Alabama, and that includes all the national championships, just because of all the holes that were in this team heading into the season, all the questions we had about him, the buttons he's pushed as the season's gone on. I think he's squeezed more out of less than he has in a lot of other seasons in the past, and I think that's why for the rest of us, it's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, it got to the point where everybody got tired of Alabama because of their dominance and because of the best recruiting classes and the murder ball that they describe playing. But this is a fun team that has grown a lot, and they're the face of the team, Jalen Milroe. It's impossible not to like this kid. Watching how he took responsibility for the Texas loss back in Week 2, watching the way he supported his teammates in Week 3 when he got benched and cheering on the other quarterbacks that were out there, watching his post-game interviews and the smile that he has and the joy that it seems that he takes when he plays the game. It's a different Alabama feel, I'm sure, for the fans watching, for the Alabama's fans, for the opposing fans in this league, and for Coach Saban as he talks about just how much he's enjoying coaching these guys. So with all of that, I have a hard time believing he would walk away because he's still doing such a great job and still getting such fulfillment out of it. It seems like he's got a lot of years left, and I don't think a lot of people thought that after the Week 3 game against South Florida.
The rest of the SEC, certainly the SEC West, which we're going away from divisions, of course, hates to hear that. Nick Saban, it looks like he's got a lot of time still in him. To Columbia, South Carolina beats Vandy, Chris, 47-6, dominant really in all three phases. It's always a lot of fun when you can get backups in. Of course, the true freshman quarterback, Lenora Sellers, he gets himself a touchdown, and really that feel-good momentum-building win that South Carolina needed, that I'm not sure they obviously didn't really get against Jacksonville State. They pound Vanderbilt. Now you've got Kentucky and Clemson upcoming. You know, what you saw from that game, I know it's hard to take a lot away because Vandy is a team that they are what they are, but you've won back-to-back games. You're starting to kind of maybe feel good about yourself, and here comes the Kentucky Wildcats. This game is a pick-em, Chris, in Vegas. I think it's a really, really interesting matchup. The over-under's at 52.5. Kentucky's weapons, I think it could be a high-scoring game. If you have any takeaways from South Carolina's win over Vandy, you can share. But thoughts on that South Carolina-Kentucky game? It's a night game at Williams-Brice Stadium, but I think that's going to be a really, really fun match to watch. And obviously, South Carolina's bowl hopes rest in the balance, if you will.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to go back to what Shane Beamer said after that win over Jacksonville State. It's like, hey, we're not going to apologize for celebrating a win, regardless of who it's against. They needed that game against Jacksonville State to get some momentum going. Now, all of a sudden, you've beaten Vanderbilt, as you mentioned, 2 games in a row that you feel like something's starting to click here. And I know it's against inferior competition and what you'll face the next 2 games. But I mean, we fully expected Shane Beamer to get his team off the mat. I mean, these guys have been doing it for the last couple of years, dealing with injuries this year and still showing up, playing with great competitiveness. great spirit about playing the game, watching what Spencer Rattler does to lead that team. I expected nothing less from him, and it almost feels like these two teams are headed in opposite directions. Even though Kentucky's got the better record, feels like South Carolina's starting to roll, and Kentucky's having a hard time. That game against Mississippi State 2 weeks ago, I think, was a little bit of an aberration. They caught a team that's just not playing very well, and may have covered up some of the issues that still exist defensively for Kentucky, which is really surprising to say, given Mark Stoops is from that side of the ball, his emphasis and his background, and then Brad White and what a great job he typically does. But they got exposed again by Alabama, and that's not a indictment. I mean, that's a lot of teams have that struggle when they play Alabama's offense. But on the heels of Georgia and Missouri and the Tennessee game, they're giving up a lot of points. So I'm with you on that. I think it's going to be a fun ball game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring ball game. Devin Leary seems like he's starting to get things going. So I don't know what the total is in that, but I might go ahead and dip my toe a little bit on the over right now.
52.5 in that one, Chris Doering. So
maybe I'm going both feet in. Then give me both of them.
That is the 7:30 p.m. Eastern SEC Network prime time. So you guys, your crew will be on that one. Do you get a vote, Chris, in the Heisman Trophy race? Do you get a vote in that? I think you know where I'm going with this.
Well, here's the thing. So on the show yesterday, we got into talking about something, and I mentioned the fact that I was given a vote here recently in the Broyles Award by the folks in Little Rock, and Dari chose to one-up me with the fact that he's a Heisman voter. So no, I do not have the Heisman vote at this time, but if I did, it would be going to the guy that I'm sure you're leading me to right now.
Yeah, again, I wasn't bringing it up to say that Dari one-upped you. I was bringing it up to say 300 passing yards, 200 rushing yards, first time in SEC history. Jayden Daniels, would you say he's the front runner right now? Because what he did to the Florida defense, I mean, we've never seen it. Literally, we've never seen it before. Historic.
I've been saying this for weeks, though. I've said it for probably over a month that he's the best player in college football, that he deserves to win the Heisman Trophy. I didn't think he would win it with the 3 losses that were on the resume, with him leaving before the end of the third quarter against Alabama. But I think people actually took note in that ball game, and then to follow it up with another performance like he had on Saturday against Florida, I think has gotten the nation's attention, and doing things that nobody that's ever played college football has ever done before is getting that attention. Say what you want. I mean, Bo Nix has done a nice job at Oregon. Michael Penix Jr., one of these players that I love to watch as well, but he's not. You could say, what's the definition of the Heisman winner? Is it the most outstanding player? Is it the most valuable to his team? Is it the guy that's the all-around best? I honestly believe that Jayden Daniels is all of the above. Like, if you didn't have Jayden Daniels on that roster, they'd probably be a 500 team in Baton Rouge right now. And it's a shame that defense hasn't been better this year, because I think they're wasting a generational type offense, maybe second only to the 2019 offense that they've had there before. But Jayden Daniels does it all. And I had a number of Florida people texting me throughout the game and then post-game on Saturday night about the defense and complaining about how bad they are. He did the same thing to Alabama's defense, and Alabama's defense is a very good defense. So he makes really highly athletic, highly recruited, highly developed players look like they're middle school football players trying to tackle a grown man. And I tell you, it's easy to cheer for him. It's easy to cheer for him because he's fun to watch, because he's got a great vibe about him. And when he came into this league at the beginning of the season, the year before this one, nobody even thought he was going to win the job. And I didn't think much of the acquisition through the transfer portal, but he has developed since about midway through the 2022 season into a guy that's not only a great athlete with the ball in his hands, but one that can throw the football with great accuracy as well.
Chris, Missouri takes Tennessee to the woodshed. I mean, at Faurot Field. This, to me, Chris, felt like, the Missouri defense, we talked about them all summer, returning just over 80% of their production. They were one of the best in the conference last year, and they've been solid this year. I don't know that I'd say they've been great or even met my expectations, but that game on Saturday, like, that's what we expected to see, or at least I expected to see all year long. Tennessee couldn't get anything going in the rushing attack. Their top leading rusher was Joe Milton with 36 yards. Top leading rusher that was a running back was Jalen Wright with 22. Brady Cook was really good in this game. Cody Schrader goes for over 200. My biggest question is this, Chris. I just wonder, for the Missouri football program long-term, are we going to look back and say this was a one-off type of year for them, or can Eli Drinkwitz keep it rolling? Because, I mean, what they're doing is really special. This could be a 10-win team, and not many people saw Mizzou reaching those heights this year.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions in the preseason, particularly at media days, about who the second best team was in the East, and nobody mentioned Missouri. It was all Tennessee, Kentucky, maybe Florida, but South Carolina. I don't think anybody thought Missouri would be able to evolve into that. I mean, why would you? I mean, in his 3 years there prior to this season, he'd never been more than a 500 coach. Hadn't won more than 6 games. I mean, like this came out of nowhere, and I think it starts with that acquisition of Luther Burden and being able to keep him in the offseason from getting into the transfer portal. He's a St. Louis kid, convincing him to stay at home. Now you have proof positive of what those kids in that part of the country can do, staying in their in-state university, making the NIL money with the rule that has been changed there within the state, and you're able to come compete for a conference championship and potentially more. This is, I think, the first wave of what is going to continue to help that program evolve. And I think it's fun to watch, man. And maybe the most fun for me was watching another former walk-on and Cody Schrader, guy that was playing at Truman State 2 years ago, came into this ball game as the number 1 rusher in the conference, but I still don't think people really understood how good he was. Going off, I mean, this Tennessee defense was number 1 against the rush in the conference, only giving up 97 yards a game. And he had 105 at halftime. And that was in addition to the 93 he had receiving in the first half, put up tremendous numbers. I think true dominance is taking a team, beating them at what they do best. This Tennessee team runs the ball really well and stops the run. And Missouri ran the ball all over them to the tune of, 255 yards, I think. You mentioned it. They didn't even eclipse 100-yard rushing against Blake Bortles' defense. Blake Baker's defense. But I think they had 83 yards on the ground total. If you don't think that Eli Drinkwitz remembered 66-24 and 62-24, I can promise you he did, because they made it a point to go out there, be physical, beat them at their own game, dominate them, and not take their foot off the pedal until the end of the ball game.
Chris, switching gears pretty dramatically here. I just think it's interesting with the SEC expanding next season, and we're talking about programs like Missouri or, even Arkansas, whatever, like the SEC hierarchy. I'm just thinking to myself, how much more difficult is it going to make it for coaches? Because I think there is some value in, hey, we're finishing second in the SEC East, or we're top half of this division or that. Like, divisions are going away. So I guess, does that make sense? Like, I'm like, it's going to be almost tougher for coaches to hang their hats on certain things, because it's just going to be 16 teams down. And I mean, you're going to get exposed, obviously, even more so than you already are if you're not up to snuff. But do you feel that as well? Like, is it going to become more difficult for coaches to kind of justify progress? And because there's not going to be it's not as flashy to say, well, we finished 8th in the conference. Like, nobody's going to be bragging about that. I think that's really interesting in regards to the dynamic of, because you're always trying to keep your fan base, to your point, in good spirits, and all of a sudden it gets taken away.
That's a good point. While at the same time, I also think it's going to be easier to help show your fan base that you're doing great things, that you're competitive, because with the expansion of the playoffs, I think it's going to be incredible. It already has been, and it's going to be even more difficult with the elimination of divisions to get to Atlanta. But you could have a tremendous season. You could have a Missouri type season where you said it, they win 10 ball games, don't play for an SEC title, but get to a college football playoff. To me, that's real progress for a program like that. Kentucky could have been that in recent years. Tennessee was that probably last year. Like, there's a lot more hope that these teams in this conference have, especially with the dominance of Alabama and Georgia, to think about, what real success looked like. And that's playing meaningful games in November and getting into postseason games that matter in December and January.
And that's a good point, Chris, because Missouri, I'm sure when the college ball playoff rankings come out, they're going to jump up a couple spots. They'd be fighting right now for a playoff spot. You have to think, if you're Mizzou, man, why couldn't the 12-team playoff been this year? Won't spend a lot of time on this one, Chris. Auburn dominates Arkansas. We've probably heard the rumors at this point, and somebody saying Pittman's gone. Oh, wait, he's actually not. anytime that chatter begins, and anytime you see a loss like that on your home field, no matter who the opponent is, typically not a good sign. But on the flip side, Chris, I feel like all of a sudden Auburn's heating up a little bit. It's going to set up a really, really fun Iron Bowl in a couple of weeks.
It's so funny doing what I do when watching the tape and trying to project what's going to happen from week to week. And I thought Arkansas figured something out in Gainesville. I thought they simplified their playbook. I thought they got back to doing what they do, and that's running KJ and Rocket. I thought that they had a really good plan that created some momentum for them. And I looked at Auburn as a team that I'm not really buying the Peyton Thorne passing game evolving thing. And they didn't necessarily throw it as good against Vandy as they did the previous week against Mississippi State. And then you come out, you watch not only Auburn move the ball up and down the field offensively, throwing it, running it, special teams returns, but you watch just how inept Arkansas looked. They go 3 and out the first 3 possessions. They get that big interception. You think they're almost going to take it to the house and the game's going to change. Set the offense up at the 20 and they gain 2 yards and kick a field goal. That was almost the nail in the coffin right there, where you can't do anything with the ball at all. And I think it's scary to think about. To your point, they're creating momentum. They're having a lot of success, and they're doing it with subpar players that Hugh Freeze is openly trying to replace. I mean, he's out here trying to get guys that fit his scheme a little bit better, that are better talented players than what he has right now. And I think the future is very scary. If you're an SEC team. I know, again, the division's going away, but I think this is an Auburn team that we're going to be talking about in a very different situation in the next couple of years than we are right now.
Chris, finally, before we get you out of here to week 12 really quickly, it is Cupcake Saturday in the SEC as teams get ready for rivalry weekend. We've talked about South Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee. Do you want to spend any time on that one? I mean, I feel like Georgia, they're going to get my benefit of the doubt. That's for sure. I mean, I'm sure Tennessee gives a valiant effort, but the Dogs, I think, will handle business. But your Gators is where I want to close out on.
Yeah.
Go to Missouri, still fighting for that 6th win. It's a night game in Como. Man, what's got to happen for Florida? Because I think getting that 6th win is crucial for Billy Napier.
Yeah, say what you want about that loss on Saturday night. I thought Florida played hard. I thought that they were competitive in the first half. They did a great job down in the red zone against the Jayden Daniels-led offense of LSU. They did a great job on 3rd down, only 1 of 5 for the Tigers on that side of the ball. I thought the reversal of the catch by Khalil Jackson, to me, I don't know how there was enough proof that to overturn that. That was a big part in the game. You can't miss a possession against that LSU offense, and that was kind of something that put Florida behind the 8 ball they couldn't recover from. But I like what they're doing on offense. I like Graham Mertz a lot. I think he's been one of the real surprises in the conference this year. I think he's got a lot of weapons at his disposal. But I believe in Missouri. Missouri's a really good football team, and so they're going to have their hands full. I'm not sure if Florida's defense is going to be able to stop Cody Schrader and company and what they've developed into with the ability to run and pass. Honestly, if Florida gets bowl eligible, I think it's more likely to happen against an undefeated Florida State team at home in the final week of the season than it is going to Como, which is going to be a tough test in and of itself. But it's a weird situation that we're in right now, as opposed to a couple of weeks ago when Florida was 5-2. Heading into Jacksonville, and we're thinking about, man, can they pull this upset off over the number 1 team in the country? And a couple weeks later, now we're talking about them needing 1 win in the last 2 just to play in the postseason. And you talked about fan bases that are a little anxious right now. Florida's is certainly one of them for sure.
Just 2 weeks remain in the 2023 regular season of the college football season. Crazy to think. Chris Doering of SEC Network. Chris, this is always a lot of fun, my man. I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to doing it again next week.
Yeah, man, running out of Mondays to do this, brother, but I'll be here and enjoy doing it with you as well.